All right, give it up for Mike Steensen about JavaScript proxies.
You know, I was really worried about who I was going to follow, and I had to get the rocket guy. But anyways, my name is Mike Steensen, and I work at the James Smucker Company, and I'm just going to talk to you about JavaScript proxies. And this is something I recently started getting into, and I thought it'd be useful to give a lightning talk on it. And so without further ado, let's just get into it. So what is the JavaScript proxy? So it's just a wrapper. That's all it is, right? It wraps around another object in JavaScript. And in that wrapper, you can provide handlers for the essential or fundamental operations that happen to that object during the execution. Things like gets, sets, deletes, define properties, and so on. You can insert your own code into those operations and do whatever you want. You could say, nope, that's not going to happen. Or, yep, that's fine. Or I can say, I can train, I can cast it as a different object before it gets to the object underneath, and so on. But let's go into some of the use cases for this. One of the things you can do is extending an object behavior. So with an object, it's just a set of properties, methods, and so on. With a proxy, because it wraps around it, you can supply your own methods that don't exist on that object from the get-go. You can put in access control. You can allow or disallow the access of properties or methods, or you can say, nope, that's not going to happen. You're not allowed to put a set, or you're not allowed to set this property on this object. You can do input validation and standardization. Now, in JavaScript, you probably know that it's not a strongly typed language, and you can kind of set any property to any value you want. Well, in this case, you can read the property, what it's going to be updated to, and say, yes, this is good, this is not good, and say, return false, and for that purpose, it'll throw a runtime error. You can also do debugging and logging. And just as, like I said, you can override the essential functions of an object, you can insert your own tracing in there and debug points that you can hook into for later on. So what are some of the callouts, though, before just jumping in and using these? It's not a silver bullet for everything, right? For performance, if you are doing some really processor-intensive operations, proxies are probably not the thing you want to use, because there is an order of magnitude difference between using objects and a proxy. There are limited target types that you can wrap. So primitive types, number, Boolean, string, so on, you can't wrap those. But pretty much everything else is fair game. And what about Internet Explorer? I know it's still around in certain cases, but in those cases, sorry, it's not going to be a feature for you. But let's go on to a couple examples of what you can do with it. So the first thing is, let's make a read-only object. So you have an object in your program that you want to pass out and to external code and allow it to do what it wants with it. Well, if you don't want that thing to be mutated, you can simply just return false on the set, and that will deny any set operations that happen after that point. So in this case, what I have here is a simple log operation. I'm going to read the property name from this object, and then I'm going to try to set the property. So in this case, you're going to see a log that generates, say, hey, this object property name is test. And when I try to set that to test2, it's going to throw an error, and I'm going to log that as well. So this is what you'd end up getting, I think. There we go. All right. So on to the next example. Input validation. Now, this code may be a little hard to read, but in a sense, I have an object here with an ID, a name, and created. And ID is a number, created name's a string, and created is a date. Well, in this set operation, I can look at what property is going to be targeted for the set, and I can say, well, is it a number for ID? If it's not, I'm going to log this and throw an error. And in the case where it is a number, great. And the same thing is done for name, and I didn't actually put the created in there because I'm just lazy. But in this case, you can see in this, the code below, I'm going to set ID to 2, works just fine. I'm going to try to set ID to test, which is a string, and it's going to return false in that set, and it's going to throw an error. So this is what you're going to end up getting, I think. Oh, come on. There we go. So let's move on to the third example. So debugging. So let's say you have an object that you're passing into, some third-party code, and it's doing God knows what with it. And it could be minimized code, and you have no way of going in and looking at the source. Well, you can wrap that object in a proxy and just log every interaction that happens to that object. Pass it in just as it was before, and to the external code, it's going to look the same. So we're going to be able to see what was set and what was gotten from. And so we'll be able to see the order of operation, and we'll be able to see what is mutated on that object in order. So this is what we'd end up getting here. So I was reading the ID and the name, and then I was setting the ID and the name, and I can see what it was made from and to. And there are some other examples that I've provided in the code repository that I put out here as part of this, but that's the amount of examples I put out here so far. Let's move on to support. I know I mentioned Internet Explorer does not support this, but pretty much every modern browser out there does, as well as every other JavaScript runtime like Node.js. So in conclusion, there are many use cases for it. Like I said, it's not a silver bullet, but I found it really useful in my code. I've been able to reduce the code base and different coding techniques I've done through gets and sets in objects. I've been able to just write a standard handler that creates a object like this for me. It's useful in certain situations, but not everything. And if you want more detailed information, go to developer.mozilla.org. They have great content out there. And down below is the code repository. And thanks for CodeMash for putting this on and allowing me to get up here and talk about this. Thanks.